I wasn't supposed to see the message. Nobody was. It wasn't meant for public eyes, and certainly not for mine. But there it was, sitting brazenly in the company-wide marketing group chat, blinking like a silent bomb. "Let's just cut Emily. She's dead weight with good PR. Keep it quiet, though." Sent by Vanessa Caldwell, our CEO. My CEO. My fingers froze above the keyboard. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. The office around me, though virtual, seemed to go still. Then came the flurry. 3 people left the chat immediately. Someone reacted to the message with a shocked emoji before quickly removing it. And then, a moment later, the message vanished. Deleted. But not forgotten. I stared at the empty space where my future used to be. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a public execution disguised as an accident. Vanessa thought she was messaging one of her inner circle, probably that new hire from her old startup who barely knew the difference between paid and organic content. But she'd sent it to the whole marketing team, 42 people, including me. For a few seconds, I thought maybe no one else noticed. Maybe no one would say anything. Maybe Vanessa would own it, apologize, say it was a joke or a misunderstanding. But no, the silence was suffocating. Not a single message followed, not a single "sorry, Emily," or "that wasn't meant for this chat." It was like everyone decided in unison that it was safer to pretend they hadn't seen it. And maybe they were right. I didn't respond. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I took a screenshot. Then I turned off my camera in the Zoom call we were all silently sitting in, excused myself with a fake calendar notification, and closed my laptop. My hands were shaking, not because I was afraid of losing the job, though that thought hit like ice, but because I realized something deeper, uglier. This wasn't about performance. It wasn't about restructuring or budget cuts. It was about image, control, about a woman who had been smiling at me in team meetings for months, praising my strategy decks, quoting my campaign data in board presentations, and now calling me dead weight behind my back. To everyone. By mistake. My name is Emily Warren. I'm 34 years old. I've spent the last 5 years building the brand reputation of Redwood Interactive from the ground up. When I joined, we were 2 weeks off a minor PR disaster involving a poorly timed tweet and a public call out from an industry watchdog. I rewrote every crisis protocol. I built a media network from scratch. I designed campaigns that brought in 3 of our highest profile clients to date. I sat through calls at 2 a.m. to walk nervous execs through statement drafts and trained interns until they landed full-time roles. And none of that mattered. Because the woman at the top, Vanessa, had decided I didn't fit her version of the future. And she tried to execute that decision behind closed doors quietly with a wink. But she made a mistake, and I saw it. And everyone saw me see it. I paced my apartment, still in work slacks and a wrinkled blouse. The email open on my phone as if it might disappear. I kept replaying her words in my head. Dead weight. It echoed in a way no performance review ever had. I wasn't a perfect employee, but I was damn good at what I did. And more than that, I believed in the work. I defended the company when it got things wrong. I defended her. The worst part wasn't that she planned to fire me. It was how confidently she assumed no one would care, that no one would stand up, that I wouldn't, because I was quiet, because I didn't play politics, because I did my job and let others take credit if it kept the ship moving. But that night, something shifted in me. Not rage, not revenge, something cleaner, sharper. I realized I had something she couldn't control, the truth. And this time, I wasn't going to be quiet. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. My body jolted awake before my alarm, still tense with the aftershock of the night before. My mind kept cycling through the message, the chat, the silence that followed, the way my coworkers, people I'd trained, mentored, defended, had looked the other way. I made coffee I didn't drink and sat at my kitchen table staring at my inbox, waiting for some kind of fallout, an apology, a follow-up, anything. But there was nothing. The daily meeting invites rolled in like clockwork. A new Slack thread titled Q4 Momentum Planning popped up. Vanessa even posted a cheery message in the company-wide announcements channel, something about being excited to close the quarter strong. It was like nothing had happened. Except something had. I had proof of it, saved twice on 2 devices and backed up in the cloud. But more than that, I had context and history. Vanessa hadn't always been this way. When she came in 8 months ago, she seemed like a breath of fresh air. Confident, polished, full of ideas. She said the right things in her intro meetings, talked about empowering women in leadership, praised the work of the team, especially mine. For a while, I actually believed her. I remembered the first time we spoke one-on-one. She'd called me into a Zoom after reading one of my internal strategy memos and said, "Emily, you've got a rare mind. You're not just tactical, you think in architecture." I'd smiled, a little flattered, and let myself feel hopeful. Maybe this was the kind of leadership that could push us to the next level. But it didn't take long for the patterns to show. Quiet reassignments. Senior staff members moved out of their roles and replaced by people from Vanessa's previous company. Most of them were bubbly, inexperienced, and fiercely loyal. Titles were shuffled. My direct reports were reduced without explanation. People who challenged decisions in meetings found themselves restructured or put on performance plans. When I asked for clarity on the org chart, Vanessa told me, "We're embracing fluidity. Hierarchy is outdated." That was the first red flag. But I didn't push. I adapted. I told myself it wasn't personal. I poured myself into work, as I always had. I kept our messaging sharp during product delays, kept investor communications clean when the stock dipped. I stayed late. I protected our reputation. And I watched as people like me, quiet workhorses, were slowly phased out while less capable, louder voices filled the room. I should have seen it coming. That morning, I logged into our team meeting. Cameras on, smiles fake. I looked at the little grid of faces and realized no one was going to bring it up. Not even Vanessa. She spoke with bright energy, tossing out buzzwords like agility and brand forward velocity, like she hadn't, hours earlier, typed a message that essentially called me trash. It was surreal. I kept my camera off and said nothing. My name sat mute on the screen while she talked about doubling down on culture and rallying as a team. Every word felt like sandpaper. After the meeting ended, I got a Slack message from Olivia, one of our senior copywriters who had been with the company nearly as long as I had. It was just 3 words. I saw it. I stared at the message, heart pounding. I waited. A minute later, another message came through. I took a screenshot too, just in case. I felt something shift, just slightly. I typed back, "Thank you, means more than you know." She replied with a thumbs up and then, like everyone else, said nothing more. I couldn't blame her. Fear ruled here now. I spent the rest of the day quietly gathering, pulling down emails, call notes, internal memos I'd written that were later rebranded as Vanessa's initiatives. I wasn't planning anything dramatic, not yet, but something in me had changed. I wasn't going to let this be another quiet departure. I wasn't going to let her control the narrative like she had with the others. I'd seen it too many times. People like me erased, rewritten as not aligned with the company's future, while the same leadership patted themselves on the back for tough decisions. And it wasn't just me. The signs were everywhere. There was Marcus in analytics who got pushed out after questioning the legitimacy of a dashboard Vanessa's favorite hire had built. It turned out to be riddled with errors. There was Priya from our DEI council who raised concerns about hiring practices and suddenly found her budget slashed and her responsibilities reassigned. There was Jeremy from media relations who vanished after a supposed performance review that no one could confirm even happened. The more I looked, the clearer it became. Vanessa's leadership wasn't leadership, it was curation. She wasn't building a team, she was building an audience. That evening, I got a call from Amanda, our former VP of HR, who had resigned 3 months ago. We hadn't talked much since, but she texted asking if I had a minute. I stepped onto my balcony and answered. She didn't waste time. "I heard what happened," she said. "From who?" I asked. "People still talk," she replied. "Listen, I don't want to push you into anything, but if you're thinking of fighting back, do it smart. Don't just leak a screenshot. That'll get brushed off as a joke or taken out of context. If you want to be heard, you need pattern, evidence, repetition." I asked her if she'd be willing to write a statement if it came to that. She was quiet for a second, then said, "If you do this right, yeah, I will." We talked for 15 minutes. She gave me advice, what to gather, what not to touch, which internal systems log metadata automatically. When we hung up, I sat in the dark a long time, looking out over the city. I'd spent so many years believing that if I worked hard, played fair, and stayed focused, it would be enough. That people like Vanessa couldn't win forever. That someone would step in. But they never did. Until now. Because this time, I had the evidence. And this time, I wasn't going to walk away quietly. The day after my call with Amanda, something in me clicked into place. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't confused. I was focused. Vanessa had tried to erase me with a single careless message, but all she'd done was expose the rotten structure beneath her polished leadership act. Now it was my turn to observe her the way she'd been watching the rest of us, coldly, clinically, and without mercy. I started small, quiet. I downloaded my full Slack history. I pulled every email that included my name in any chain where Vanessa was present. I cross-referenced calendar invites and meeting summaries. I printed out agendas where my work had been repackaged and rebranded by people I had once mentored. I flagged every document where Vanessa had inserted her comments just after my original language was stripped away, replaced by empty buzzwords and vague nonsense that executives apparently loved. I wasn't building a folder of complaints. I was building a timeline, a narrative, one that couldn't be dismissed as personal bitterness. I also started to ask questions, but only to the right people. I reached out to former employees quietly. I used personal emails, never company accounts. I made it casual at first. Hey, how's the new gig? Just thinking about you today. But slowly, carefully, I moved toward the truth. Ever feel like your departure wasn't really your decision? Most of them responded with guarded warmth, a few with silence, but 3 replied with versions of the same sentence. Yeah, but what could I do? One of them, Priya, asked if we could talk. We met at a coffee shop near the lake. She looked different, lighter, freer, but her smile faltered when I asked about the way she was pushed out. She made me feel like I was going crazy, Priya said, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup like she needed something to anchor her. At first, it was subtle. Fewer invites, less access to leadership. Then the budget disappeared. And when I pushed back, she told me I was being emotional and resistant to change. And then, HR called me in and said maybe I should consider my future elsewhere. She paused. I thought maybe it was just me. It wasn't, I said. I told her what had happened to me, the chat, the silence, the quiet replacement already in the wings. Priya exhaled slowly, like something heavy inside her had finally been named. I wish I'd saved more, she said, but I deleted a lot when I left. That's okay, I told her. I have enough for both of us. Back at my apartment, I created a folder labeled Board Package. That's what it was going to be. Something complete enough, factual enough, undeniable enough that even the most PR-conscious board member would have no choice but to act. I didn't want revenge, I wanted accountability. And I wanted it from the very people who had been too comfortable to see what was happening inside their own leadership team. One night, while reviewing my files, I noticed something I hadn't paid attention to before. Calendar patterns. Vanessa frequently scheduled closed-door meetings with her 2 favorite hires every Thursday afternoon. I'd cross-checkered them with a few policy changes and team shifts that had quietly rippled across departments. Marcus's exit, Priya's reassignment, a new internal memo about streamlining communication. It was always the day after those meetings that people found out they were being realigned. I dug deeper. I found a series of emails where Vanessa used vague language like problematic voice, to legacy, and not future-facing to describe senior employees. In one email, she wrote, "We don't need guardians of the old brand, we need believers." She was building a cult, not a company. I added it all to the file. I wrote a 1-page summary for each section: communications rewriting, staff restructuring, internal defamation, and linked every single claim to a primary source. By the time I was done, it was 47 pages long, not including attachments. Still, I knew what people would say. That's just office politics. She's just a tough leader. This is what change looks like. But that was the point. Vanessa had learned to weaponize language, to make cruelty sound like innovation, to turn silencing people into shaping culture. and I knew exactly how to break that narrative by using her own words. Then something unexpected happened. I received an email, internal but personal, from Vanessa. The subject line was, "Let's connect." I clicked it, heart suddenly racing, half expecting legal threats or gaslighting. But instead it was calm, friendly, even. "Hey, Emily, hope you're doing okay. I wanted to clear the air about the message earlier this week. It was clearly not meant for the team and absolutely wasn't a reflection of your contributions. We all value the work you've done. Let's chat sometime this week and realign." No apology, no ownership, just spin. She didn't even reference what the message said, just that it wasn't meant for the team, like the only problem was exposure. I stared at the email for a long time. Then I responded with 2 words, noted, thanks. I knew what she was doing. She'd realized I wasn't going quietly, and now she wanted to create a paper trail of outreach and good faith so that if anything went public, she could say, "We tried to work it out, but I wasn't playing that game." I didn't respond further. I didn't agree to a call. Instead, I sent myself a copy of the email, PDF'd it, and dropped it into the board package under a new section, attempted containment. A few days later, I had dinner with Amanda. She looked at the thick folder and whistled. "You're not just making noise," she said. "You're writing her ending." I didn't smile. I didn't feel triumphant. I just nodded. "I'm almost ready." "Are you going to send it?" she asked. "Soon," I said, "but not yet. One more thing I need." That one more thing came the next morning, when I got a message from Olivia again. It was short. "She's talking to the board next week, Vision 2024 review." And that was it. The window, the perfect moment. Vanessa was walking into a board meeting expecting to lay out a plan for the future. I was about to hand them the truth about the present. And once I did, there would be no unseeing it. The night before the board meeting, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, the light from my laptop still glowing softly across the room. The final version of the board package sat on my desktop like a live wire. Everything was there. Every message, every email, every manipulated document, every recorded instance of Vanessa twisting the truth to suit her optics. I had taken Amanda's advice and framed it with cold precision. No drama, no emotional appeals, just patterns, dates, receipts. I'd even included an index and a 1-page executive summary titled "Concerns Regarding Executive Conduct and Cultural Deterioration." It sounded sterile, but I knew the effect it would have when they read the contents. This wasn't about a single mistake in a Slack message. It was about sustained, calculated behavior that harmed the company's people and reputation. I had anticipated every excuse, every angle of spin, and cut it off at the knees. 7:04 a.m., I hit send. I sent it directly to each member of the board of directors using their official Redwood Interactive emails, not blank copied, not mass forwarded, individually addressed, with a personalized salutation. I CC'd the internal legal counsel, HR compliance officer, and left out one single name, Vanessa Caldwell. She didn't need to be copied. She would hear about it soon enough. The subject line was simple: internal conduct documentation, time sensitive. I didn't say much in the body of the email, just a note. As a long-standing senior team member, I believe it is my responsibility to provide you with the following information ahead of today's Vision 2024 board review. Please see attached. Nothing more. Then I closed the laptop and made myself breakfast for the first time in weeks. It tasted like nothing. But for the first time in a long time, I felt still. Not angry, not scared, just still. By 9:00 a.m., I saw the first red receipt, then another, and another. By 9:42, 7 of the 9 board members had opened the email. At 10:15, I received a reply from a member I'd never interacted with directly, a woman named Nancy Carver, one of our more senior board participants. Her reply was brief. "Emily, thank you for bringing this to our attention. I appreciate the clarity and documentation. Please note this will be reviewed with the seriousness it deserves." And then silence for hours. I didn't expect fireworks. Corporate structures don't burn loudly, they collapse in silence. I went through the motions of my day, answering emails, attending a strategy sync where Vanessa spoke like nothing had changed, her voice bright, confident, even a little smug. At one point, she mentioned that she'd be presenting the 2024 brand roadmap to the board that afternoon. "Big vision coming," she said with a grin. "Stay tuned." I almost laughed. At 4:06 p.m., Olivia messaged me again. She just went in. At 4:42, she's still talking. At 5:13, they just ended the session early. And at 5:28, they asked for a follow-up without her. That night, I got a phone call. Unknown number. I picked up. "Emily? This is Jerome Hayes, chair of the board." His voice was formal, calm. "I'd like to personally thank you for what you shared. I'll be candid. We were unaware of most of it. That's not an excuse. That's a failure on our part." I didn't speak right away. I wanted to hear where he was going. "The board has voted to initiate an internal inquiry. Vanessa will be stepping back from her day-to-day duties effective immediately while we conduct an independent review." He paused, as if weighing whether to go further. Then he said, "I'd like to ask if you'd be willing to speak with the external firm we're bringing in." I told him, yes, of course. I asked nothing about Vanessa's fate, offered no suggestions, made no demands. I didn't need to. The information spoke for itself. The next morning, a company waste-while email went out, executive transition announcement. It was full of the usual language. Vanessa would be taking time to support the board's strategic review. Interim leadership would ensure stability and continuity, etc. But the reaction across Slack was immediate and unmistakable. People weren't confused, they knew something had happened. They didn't know who, but they knew it wasn't the board's idea. Whispers filled private chats, the people who had been quiet, scared, frozen. Some of them reached out. Olivia messaged, "Did you?" I just replied, "Take care of yourself, the rest will take care of itself." Amanda called me. "I read the announcement. Jesus, Emily, you actually did it." I asked her if she'd speak to the investigators. She said she already had. In the days that followed, I didn't stretch, didn't post anything cryptic on LinkedIn, didn't send any petty follow-up emails. I showed up, I did my job, I answered questions when asked, I submitted to interviews with a third-party firm, handed over documents, described meetings. Everything I said I could prove. I had receipts, timelines, corroboration. It wasn't about drama, it was about documentation, and the weight of that kind of truth is impossible to spin. 2 weeks later, a final board statement went out. Vanessa's leave became a resignation. No quotes, no statement from her, no best wishes, just gone. That afternoon, Jerome called me again. He offered me a choice, not my old job back. That was still mine. He offered me the role of interim chief communications officer with the option to stay on permanently if I wanted it. I asked him if this was a political move, a PR bandage to show they'd listened. He paused, then said, "Honestly, maybe at first, but not anymore. You showed a kind of clarity under pressure that we need right now. You didn't just react, you acted with intent. That's rare." I told him I'd think about it. That night, I went for a walk around my neighborhood for the first time in weeks without checking my phone. I stopped by the bookstore, bought myself a novel I'd been meaning to read, sat on a bench, let the cold evening air sting my cheeks, and finally exhaled. Vanessa had tried to erase me with a smile and a wink. She thought no one would notice, that I'd go quietly, that I'd be too scared to fight. But she underestimated one thing, not my anger, not my ambition, my precision. And in the end, that's what undid her. The Monday after Vanessa's resignation, the office felt different. Not louder, not busier, just more aware. Like everyone was moving through a place they suddenly realized had been quietly poisoned. Slack channels that had been tense and silent during her reign began stirring again. Team leads who had once looked over their shoulders now spoke more freely. Even people who had never liked me were nodding in meetings, offering casual greetings like we were part of the same thing again. In a strange way, we were survivors of a shared pressure we hadn't dared acknowledge until it lifted. I didn't make a scene, I didn't change my behavior, but everyone knew. They didn't say it outright, but their eyes said it when I entered the room. There were questions under the surface, respect laced with caution. I didn't owe anyone answers, but I gave one anyway, to the people who needed it. That week, I called a team meeting. No agenda, no slide deck. I told everyone I just wanted to check in, to listen. When we logged into the call, faces that had grown stiff and guarded over the last few months slowly began to soften. I thanked them for holding the line during a difficult period. I told them I wasn't there to rewrite history or pretend like none of it happened. I acknowledged the fear, the confusion, the silence. I told them what I'd told the board, that leadership means accountability, not authority, that protecting people isn't just a moral stance, it's a strategic one. You don't build loyalty by demanding it, you build it by deserving it. No one said anything for a moment. Then someone unmuted, a junior designer named Kat, who rarely spoke in group settings. She simply said, "Thank you." That was it, but it meant everything. The following days were filled with small, steady shifts. People started volunteering ideas again. A stalled campaign picked up momentum. The social team pitched a new concept that hadn't made it past Vanessa's filters months earlier. This time, we greenlit it immediately. HR reinstated a mentorship program that had been quietly shelved. It was like the company was breathing again, unsure but alive. Meanwhile, I was still undecided about Jerome's offer. Interim CCO. It was tempting. Not just the title or pay bump, but the ability to rebuild, to set things right from the top down. But something kept me hesitant. Not fear, not imposter syndrome, just a question I couldn't shake. Did I want to stay in a place I'd had to fight to save? Or had I already done what I came to do? That answer came in the form of a voicemail. Late one evening, I was cleaning out a shared folder from the PR team archive, just making space, clearing clutter. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go. A few minutes later, the voicemail transcribed on my screen. "Emily, well, I guess you know. Look, I'm not calling to apologize. That would be too easy, and you'd never buy it anyway. I'm just calling because I can't stop thinking about how it all played out, how quickly it happened. You were quiet for so long, and then, boom, you detonated the whole thing. And the worst part is, he did it clean, surgical. You didn't even have to lie. That's what still gets me. You didn't lie. Anyway, whatever you're doing next, I hope you know I underestimated you. Goodbye." The timestamp read 1:14 a.m. The caller ID didn't list a name, but I didn't need one. I sat for a long time after that, not out of vindication but reflection. There was a version of me from 6 months ago who would have played that message for friends, sent it to Amanda with a smirk, saved it for some future moment of satisfaction. But I didn't need to. I deleted it. I didn't want Vanessa's voice in my life anymore. I didn't want her power, her influence, her chaos. I wanted clarity. That's when I started writing something new. Not a report, not an email, not a case memo. A document titled Foundation. It wasn't for the board. It wasn't even for Redwood. It was for me. A framework for what a healthy, resilient organization looks like. I wrote it the way I wrote campaign briefs, cleanly, precisely, with conviction. I outlined what transparency looks like in practice, how feedback loops must function, the difference between leadership and performance. I mapped out an ideal communications architecture, one that centered empathy and decisiveness equally. It was the kind of document I wished someone had handed me 5 years ago. By the time I finished, I realized what it was: a blueprint. The next morning, I told Jerome I appreciated the offer, that I was honored, that it mattered to be asked. But I also told him I wasn't going to take the role. He paused, then asked if I would reconsider. I said no. I told him I believed the company was ready to heal, but that I wasn't meant to do it from within. Sometimes you fix something, I said, so that the next person doesn't have to. 2 weeks later, I quietly gave notice. No press release, no send-off party, just a simple farewell message to the team, thanking them for the work, the fight, the trust. I didn't mention Vanessa. I didn't mention the board, just the people. The ones who had stayed, who had struggled, who had chosen to believe in each other again. And then I logged off for the last time. 3 days after that, I walked into the office space of a nonprofit startup I'd agreed to advise pro bono, a tiny organization doing real community storytelling work. Their founders were scrappy, underfunded, and overwhelmed. But they were passionate, honest, They asked for help building out their voice, their reach, their message. I said yes, not because I needed to be needed, but because they listened. Vanessa tried to cut me quietly. She tried to erase me in a sentence, with a smirk and a wink. What she didn't know, what she never understood, is that I wasn't just the voice behind the message. I was the message. And no one erases a story that knows how to tell itself. 2 months after I left Redwood Interactive, I walked past their building without intending to. It just happened. I was heading to a meeting across town, and the most direct route took me right by it. I hadn't seen it since my last day. I had avoided it on purpose, really. But there it stood, the familiar glass front, the corporate flags flapping slightly in the breeze, the lobby where I'd once waited for clients, for interviewees, for late Ubers when I worked too late to care. I slowed down just slightly, then kept walking. No one noticed me. I didn't expect them to, but still, something settled in my chest, a strange mix of gratitude and mourning. That place had shaped me. Not the building, not even the company, the pressure, the betrayal. The moment I realized I had a spine stronger than I thought. Redwood didn't make me, but it showed me what I'd outgrown. In the weeks since my exit, I had moved slowly but deliberately. I didn't rush to update my LinkedIn, didn't announce anything dramatic. I took time to rest, to reflect, to recover. My days were quiet but productive. I read more, I journaled, I answered a few requests to speak with other professionals, women mostly, who were navigating toxic environments of their own. The stories they shared were painfully familiar. Being called too emotional for setting boundaries, being labeled uncooperative for asking hard questions, being pushed aside by managers who were threatened by competence. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew what they were feeling, and sometimes that was enough. I became a quiet resource, a person people could talk to when they didn't know who else to trust. Then, something unexpected happened. A journalist reached out. She was working on a feature about executive accountability in tech companies, and someone had told her to speak with me, not for quotes, just off the record. I agreed, cautiously. We met in a quiet corner of a bookstore cafe, and she asked good questions, respectful ones. I didn't give her names. I didn't show her documents. But I told her about patterns, how executives weaponized ambiguity, how branding could be used to whitewash internal decay, how employees were expected to carry the culture while leadership cashed out on its image. She took notes but didn't push for details. At the end, she said, "You're the third person I've spoken to this month with almost the exact same story. Different companies, different industries, same playbook." That didn't surprise me. What surprised me was that I felt no need to expose anyone. The work was exposing itself. Meanwhile, I had quietly started consulting. Not full-time, not officially, but the work came to me. First through Amanda, then through contacts I'd built over the years, teams in transition, companies in crisis, startups trying to build ethical foundations before they scaled. I helped them craft internal narratives, reshape communication systems, create space for people to actually speak. I didn't sell it as DEI or leadership coaching or strategic messaging. I just asked them one question. What story are your people telling themselves about working here? And is it true? That approach caught on. By the end of that quarter, I had 4 recurring clients and a wait list. I wasn't rich, I wasn't viral, but I was building something that felt clean, whole, real, my own narrative, not one written by someone in a boardroom, but one I was authoring every day with purpose. Then, one afternoon I received an email. The subject line was simple, a note from the new CEO. It was from Redwood. I stared at it for a long time before clicking. The email was from a woman named Carmen Lynn, someone I vaguely remembered hearing about, apparently brought in after Vanessa's departure to stabilize things. The email was brief, professional, and warm. She introduced herself, acknowledged that she had read the report I'd submitted to the board months ago and said it had played a role in shaping how she intended to lead moving forward. She didn't ask me for anything. She just thanked me for my integrity, my work, and, in her words, your insistence on a culture that matches its messaging. I didn't respond right away. I needed to think. But later that night, I wrote back, "Thank you for your message. I sincerely hope Redwood becomes what so many of us once believed it could be." I meant it. Vanessa, from what I had heard, had disappeared from the industry. No new roles, no press, no soft re-entry via advisory board or LinkedIn thought piece. She had, as far as I could tell, gone silent. And that was fine with me. I didn't need to track her downfall. I didn't need a headline or a quote. I had already won in the quietest, most complete way possible, not by destroying her, but by refusing to let her destroy me. There's something no one tells you about vindication. It doesn't come in a surge. It comes in waves. In the slow rebuild of confidence, in the steady return of sleep, in the simple, powerful experience of walking into a room and knowing you belong there because you put yourself there. Not through politics, not through compliance, through clarity. That spring, I signed the lease on a small space of my own, nothing fancy, just 2 rooms and a conference nook. I named the practice quietly. No buzzwords, no branding gimmicks, just Warren Collective, a space for story, strategy, and structure. My first hire was a woman I'd once mentored who'd left the industry after burnout. My second was an intern I paid more than minimum wage. We took on work that mattered. I said no when it didn't, and I slept better than I had in years. Sometimes I thought about the day I read that message, the moment it all cracked open. And then I'd think about everything that followed. Not just the fallout, but the people who helped me rebuild. Amanda, Olivia, Priya. The people who said nothing but stayed kind. The silence of that chat still echoed, but it no longer haunted me. It reminded me why I did what I did. Why it mattered to speak. Why it mattered to stay calm and act sharp. Vanessa called me dead weight, but in the end, the only thing that sank was her story. Mine rose. One afternoon, nearly a year after the Slack message that changed everything, I sat in a sunlit corner of my office, sipping cold coffee that had long gone untouched. The Warren Collective had just wrapped a strategy session with a nonprofit working to reform hiring practices in public schools, and my team had left for the day. It was quiet in the way I liked. No pressure, no false urgency, just the hum of real work done with real intent. I looked around at the space we'd built. The whiteboard was still covered in notes from our last sprint. A thank you card from a former client was pinned to the wall. There were no mission statements printed in bold letters, no motivational posters. Just people and purpose. That was all I'd ever wanted. A notification buzzed softly on my laptop. It was an email. Subject line, "You spoke, it mattered." I opened it slowly. It was from a young woman who had attended a panel I'd agreed to join a month earlier on workplace retaliation and ethical leadership. I barely remembered what I'd said, but apparently she did. She wrote about how she had watched her own manager get away with harassment, how she'd been scared to say anything, how everyone kept telling her to keep her head down, but after hearing my story, she'd documented what happened, filed a report, and when HR ignored it, she sent it to the board. The manager was gone now. She'd been offered her role back, but instead she took a new job elsewhere, somewhere that didn't just talk about values, but lived them. Her final words hit me harder than I expected. "I thought you should know, you changed the ending." I stared at the screen for a long time, then closed the laptop gently. I didn't need to reply right away. Some messages were best carried quietly. The truth is, I never set out to change anyone else's story. I just refused to let someone else finish writing mine. I didn't go public. I didn't become a whistleblower icon or a LinkedIn influencer. I just told the truth, to the right people, at the right time, with proof that couldn't be spun. And when the dust settled, I didn't look back to see what people were saying. I looked forward, because the future wasn't theirs to define anymore. It was mine. Sometimes people still ask me if I regret not taking the executive role. If I feel like I gave up too soon, I tell them no. Because what I have now is something that no title could have given me. I built a space where people are heard, where silence isn't weaponized, where mistakes aren't buried but learned from. I built what I once needed and never found, inside a corporate machine that confused branding with integrity. I've learned that power isn't about position, it's about presence. It's about what you do when no one thinks you're watching, when they assume you'll disappear quietly, when they write you off as a non-threat. And then calmly, deliberately, you prove that their entire foundation rested on the assumption that you wouldn't fight back. I walked into that boardroom once with a folder and a plan. I walked out with something far more permanent, a reputation that didn't need defending, only remembering. Vanessa faded, Redwood stabilized, and I never raised my voice. I just raised the truth high enough that no one could look away. And in the end, that was enough.